This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And today, I have another interview for you. Delilah S. Dawson is here to talk about Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade, which is out today. It's a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy listening as much as we enjoyed recording it. All right, first, but we'll start here because I sometimes am lucky enough to catch authors before the book actually comes out. And so I get to ask in the lead up to Rise of the Red Blade, finally being out in the world, how are we feeling? Are we okay? Are we good?
You know, the Star Wars books are strange in that you know about them long before anybody else does. And you have the secret that you have signed many, many documents saying you won't tell anyone about. So you kind of hold, and then you finally you're allowed to announce it, but basically you're on a Star Wars panel with 30 other authors, and Mike Siglain points to you and you go, I have a book. And then that's kind of it. You can't say anything else.
Right.
And then you have this fury of writing and rewriting and then the edits, and you think you're done, and then you get emergency edits while you're like out at an anniversary meal with your spouse, and you're texting edits into your phone. And then by the time the book comes out, you're just like, that was many moons ago. So I'm super excited about San Diego Comic-Con next week, though, and the limited edition. This will be my first con edition of a Star Wars book. So
It's so really exciting. The cover looks amazing, and I might not be able to get one because I can't go this year. And I'm like, it's fine. We will recover. The collection doesn't need everything. It'll be okay. And you've done this a couple times. You've done this with Star Wars novels a couple of times before this, but I can imagine it's been a little bit different each time.
It has. Phasma was more introduction to the Star Wars schedule, and by the time it came out, I was in my first little case of burn. And I remember when we found out it hit list, my agent called me and she was like, number 10, and I was like, of what? And I was like, what list? She was like, for you. And I was like, oh, that's nice. And she was like, are you okay? And I was like, I don't think so. But once you get used to it, like once I had developed my little muscles, and now like I'm ready and very excited about everything, and did not go into burnout this time. And this book was a little easier of a process.
Yay. We learn a little something every time we do it. It's
writing IP is all about developing a very specific set of muscles.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, I think I remember how to do this. I'm not totally sure, but sometimes like muscle memory just takes over, and then and then you have those moments where you're like, I don't know if I know how to do this, but I guess I don't have a choice anymore. It's too late. We just have to keep going. I committed.
Well, actually, I've learned that the key to not having that moment, like lots of just kind of falter, we call it the soggy middle. You hit about 30 or 40,000 words into a 1,000-word novel, and you suddenly go, my God, I don't know how to write. I can't write. This is terrible. This is awful. What do I do now? Well, this book is over, I guess. And then, of course, once you learn that like pretty much every author deals with that, it's a lot easier. So with Star Wars books, the more detailed your outline, the fewer problems you have down the line, because you never really want to surprise story group at a later date, because you might lose huge chunks of stuff if thing doesn't work. Yeah. So I got to where, for Phasma, the entire journey was they go on a journey across the desert. So there was a lot to plan here. And in this book, I'm like, detail. We know this. We know all of these things. You can't come bite me in the butt later. And then they did come bite me in the butt, and I was like, how dare you? But when Filoni and Favreau want something, you have to give back those action figures. So,
I was about to say it happens, but like, I don't know how this works.
Most things happen.
So this book, without spoiling too many things for anyone who hasn't read it yet, although if you haven't yet, but you're going to, definitely do that because it's worth
Definitely
it.
do.
Yes. This book tells the story of a Jedi who grows up in the Order, but never really feels like she fits, never feels like she belongs there. Why was it important for you to tell this particular story?
I mean, I just, can you put up the name of Obi-Wan Kenobi going, of course I know him. He's me. That was my childhood. I just always felt like an alien who didn't belong, and like everyone else had been taught a specific rules of how to act and speak and interact and what to wear and how to be cool. And I had just missed that day. So I thought that like maybe if I just raised my hand enough in class and bragged about my grades enough, people would like me, which did not work. So I've recently learned I am not neurotypical. I've always known I have synesthesia. I have a diagnosis for ADHD. After like 17 online tests, a lot of talks with my therapist, I think I'm probably on the spectrum somewhere. And this journey has kind of led me to go, oh, like all this time I thought that I was broken and I was weird, and I was, but like for a reason, like there was a reason, and like my brain loves a puzzle. So I finally feel like there's been this puzzle for 45 years, and suddenly I'm like, boop, puzzle's complete. I'm weird, and it's awesome.
Oh, it all makes sense now.
So I feel like that helped in crafting Iskat, because we knew from Charles Soule's Vader comics how she ends up. And so my job was to start at the beginning and explain the journey that would take her from a good-hearted, earnest, idealistic Jedi to what we see in Charles's comic, and to make her pretty unforgivable actions in that comic make sense through the lens of some childhood trauma. So it was definitely very easy to begin the journey with, what would be the first steps that would turn someone from the Jedi. And, the idea of, you're taken as a child from your loving family and put into this creche where you're raised by Jedi, but you never have that intimate one-on-one connection that human beings, I'm assuming most Star Wars alien species, would have, where we need that one-on-one connection. We need those eyes looking at our eyes from 20 inches away, that sense of love. And you're just like, oh my God, Jedi never get that. They're told like don't have connections with don't have connections, but don't have like deep relationships with people in this way. And like that's going to be kind of traumatizing for some kids who need it. In that sense that when you want to go to someone and ask them deep personal questions, you can trust them, you're going to get more reactions like kind of going to a priest or someone in a church who has a line that they have to toe and certain platitudes they have to give you, versus really seeing you as an individual and accepting who you are unconditionally. So that schism definitely drew on some feelings I had growing up, and contributed to what started Iskat on her journey to find her true self.
Yeah, I definitely related to her character in a lot of ways. Also, just like always being the kid who like wanted to learn but never wanted to, like, I never wanted to raise my hand. I never wanted to like call attention to myself, and I didn't understand like, why is everyone doing it this way when I want to just sit and read a book and learn that way.
Right.
Yeah. So it's like, you grow up and you look back and you're like, oh, like I'm fine. Everything didn't feel fine then, but maybe it's fine now.
Also a case of like, some people, the system is made to fit certain people, but it does not fit me, and the system won't change for you.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Speaking of the system, let's talk about the Jedi. This book did a really great job of really painting a clear picture of how unprepared the Jedi were for this war. And you get the sense of that to a point in, like the films, or a lot in a lot of the other books that have come out. But this book really kind of showed from Iskat's perspective how like it just kind of threw everything into chaos, and even like they just didn't know how to handle it. And how would you? And I was wondering if how kind of like working on this story and crafting these characters and telling things from her perspective kind of changed maybe the way you looked at the Jedi.
Well, in order to have someone turn from the Jedi to the point that they will hunt down and kill the Jedi, you have to have some pretty serious grievances.
Yeah.
But it does grow from, the childhood of a lack of connection, of not belonging, of not feeling like you could be honest about who you are. about not really finding what you excel at and not having anyone reach out to help you find what you excel at, but rather to try to kind of put you into a box. Isket finds out what she's really good at, and they're like, no, don't do that. Do something else, which is like, that's very destructive to a young soul, to be like, I found the thing that makes me special, that I love, that fills me with joy. And you're like, oh, no, don't do that. That's not good. Go do over there. Go do that thing that you hate. Go do it. But we definitely tried to show it through Iskat's perspective, where, the statements are never like, I'm not saying the Jedi are bad. I'm saying Isket sees through her lens of the small picture that she can see that the Jedi are bad.
Yeah.
Because from the very small little lens that she sees, she sees a lot of chaos. She doesn't have control over the big picture, because of course the Jedi Council is not saying to all the Jedi, like, hey, look, guys, here's our whole master plan. All of you need to know. You go there, do the thing, and then you go there, do the thing, and 6 of your friends die, and you're like, this isn't good. Where they'll give them minimal plan. That's a big problem in this, is that, the Jedi are giving, she is always complaining about, like, they don't give us any information. You're like, well, what information do they have? Like, what?
Yeah.
They're, someone tells the senator something, the senator tells the other senator something, that tells the Jedi Council something, that tells, the Jedi General something. So you're like 8 rounds of telephone by the time you get your mission. So of course it's going to be ridiculous, which is, I think, I don't watch a ton of war movies, but I think that's how the ones that I've seen have basically gone, is you've just got children standing there holding guns going, what do I do?
Yeah.
Oh no, we're dead.
Yeah.
So it was pretty easy to kind of get into that mindset, while also making sure that, the way that I wrote it makes it clear that, like, these are Iskat's perceptions. I am not saying as a canon expert what the Jedi strategies were, good or bad or wrong or right, but perspective of a child on the battlefield, they were not awesome.
You talked a bit about how part of what you had to do in this book is kind of go backwards, and kind of like, what the end point is, but you have to go back to the beginning, kind of show how do we get there? How does someone get to that point? What do you think was the most challenging part of that for you, of that process?
Well, it's a real similar process for what I had to do with Phasma, is where you look at what you know of them at the, at the kind of, I don't want to say the end of their life, but as a more fully formed adult, you see that, and then you have to extrapolate what crucible would this person have been formed in. So, like for Isket, I said it had to start with, otherness and feeling different and a lack of connection, which meant that when she had, a Jedi master, that she couldn't feel a profound connection with them, and that they weren't really there for them. So that's how that character came about. We recognized that, she would kind of need an instigating factor to kind of start her feelings going. So that happens in the first chapter. You see her discover something that, that changes everything, because, something has to change everything, or it's not really a story.
Yeah.
And then as it went on, if you read Charles Soule's comic, which you don't need to read it to read this book, because it's actually integrated into the book at a later part. So you don't have to do that. You don't have to read anything to read this book. I want all of my books to be open doors to Star Wars canon. It is not a gate. You don't have to read anything. If you have seen the prequel movies or the Clone Wars or the Kenobi show, it'll make sense. So looking at his comic, she did this one very unforgivable thing that I was like, I can't get behind you on this one, my dude. Like, that wasn't cool. And so I had to, as a writer, that was the biggest challenge, is being like, I have to justify that action, which knowing how we know Inquisitors are dark side users, and we know that the dark side is not honest. It gets in there and it twists you and it lies to you and it changes you. So, that takes part in it too, that we know that this is not a pure feeling, that what she becomes later, the dark side is in there like a disease and is making her make changes. But I did want to plant some trauma in there that would make that make the dark side change her perception enough to do that horrendous act. So it's kind of like all along the way, I knew I had to drop these little gumdrops that were hinted at in Charles Soule's comic. And then we also know that she has a certain relationship with the black-skinned Twi'lek, who's on this San Diego Comic-Con exclusive cover with her. So I got to include him as well. And also, plant the seeds for what you see in Charles Soule's comic earlier in her youth with her relationship with him. So it was all very, when I'm teaching writing, I call it making the face match the butt, where what happens at the end, you kind of have to have a symmetry with what happens at the beginning. And then, they meet in the middle.
Yeah. If it helps, I read this book and had almost gotten through it. And then I was like, I got to the epilogue and I was like, this seems very familiar, not realizing that I had read this comic and had known where the story was going the whole time. But yeah, even if you haven't read the comic, it does a very good job of making sure that you don't have to do your homework, as they say.
Yeah, I argued that we should, before the epilogue, put like, almost like a choose your own adventure. Like, if you would like a certain ending, stop here. Like or just say, like, Charles Soule did this. I didn't do this. Yeah. Like, I didn't choose this.
It wasn't me. This is not my fault.
Nope. I'm just trying to clean up his mess. Which I can say because Charles and I are pals.
You're all playing in the same universe. It's fine.
We just trade action figures back and forth like kids in the 1980s. Like,
there you go. I will ask you one more question. And you're actually the first author that I've gotten to talk to who has previously written another Star Wars book. Usually I've talked to a lot of authors who it's their first one, which is great. And it's a whole
so you just get like baby deer in the headlights look.
I do. I'm like, how does it feel? And they're like, I don't know. I've never done this before.
I tell all those people on Twitter, I'm like, I'm your Star Wars auntie. You're not allowed to talk to anybody else, but you can talk to me. Like, it's safe. You can talk to me. Let me talk you through this.
I've never gotten to, because I'll ask the new writers, like, what's next? Or like, how does it feel to do this for the first time? But I get to ask you a question I've never gotten to ask an author before, which is, because this is not your first Star Wars novel, how do you think you've grown as a storyteller from your first Star Wars book to this one?
All three of my Star Wars books, it's, I guess you get somebody like, with Tim Zahn writing Thrawn, where you're writing the same character kind of moving through the ages. Mm-hmm. All of my Star Wars books have served different purposes, and they've shared some characters, but they haven't, it's like some people say Phasma and Blackspire are an unofficial duology where we're hoping for that trilogy. Because they are tied together by Vi Moradi, who is in the Disney parks. Mm-hmm. But Phasma, the first time around, it was kind of a rough experience. The Star Wars editorial had recently changed over to some new folks, and so I was dealing with kind of a bunch of people with whom I had established relationships, and we lost our first outlines. We had Star Wars outlines are pretty extensive, so I lost like a 14-page single-spaced outline. No. Where one day I just came home and there was a box of cookies on the front porch from an expensive New York cookie place. And I was like, somebody trying to poison me? Like, what is this? And I opened the cookies and there's no note or anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to eat these until I know who this is from.
Yeah.
And then I get a couple hours later, I get an email that's like, dear Delilah, I'm so sorry. By now you probably reached the cookies. And I'm going to explain to you now why we sent them to you preemptively. No. Yeah, and it was that we lost we'd been in Star Wars outlines take a long time because I'm really fast, so I'll write an outline in a day, and then my editors will have it for a week and send it back, and then I'll turn it around in a day, and then so it takes like 3 months before your outline gets okayed, and by the time your outline gets okayed, you're like, okay, this is it, I'm gonna write the book before you can change it, and we just lost the whole thing, and they're like, okay, well, let's just start over, and it was like, and you don't get more time to write the book.
No.
So it was very panicky, and there was some panic and some burnout, but yeah, and then Blackspire was a different kind of book because it was, so Phasma I say is Star Wars meets Mad Max, and then Blackspire was meant to be a kind of a guide to the Disney parks, but they let me have a lot of freedom with the story, so I brought back Cardinal and Vi Moradi. Well, Vi had to be in it, but they let me bring back Cardinal, which is very kind of them, and kind of create a new little crew. And I think of it kind of like Brooklyn Nine-Nine in Star Wars as well, with that kind of goofy found family. But it was it was written. The basis of that story was for me, but I had like a PDF of Galaxy's Edge where the whole place I had to describe it as it actually was and look at the map. So if I was telling you where someone went, I couldn't just make it up. I had to look. Right. And tell you, you run around here and through there. So it was a very interesting process to work through that. And there's some very cool stuff that happened when Galaxy's Edge opened. So that was there's never been another book like that. And I don't think there ever will be. And then this book, I wanted just a really, that old fashioned Legends feel, like it's just fun and fast and dark and feeling. And and they let me get away with it. I brought in a whole bunch of old stuff that I love. There's some Kotal references. There's species that we haven't seen a ton of since the original series. So yeah, it was an easier book to write because I knew more, because my outline was longer, because I just know my editor really well. And so, instead of writing an email, waiting 3 days, I can just text him and be like, hey, Tom, blah, blah, blah. And he'll text me right back. So it's a much more streamlined process. But you also, I think, as you go, you build up those muscles and you're ready for the disappointments of losing things and being able to think on your feet. So I would say it was easier, but we'll see what happens after it launches. Hopefully people like it.
It's so close. It's almost here. I think people will
it's a week.
Love it. Yes. I will say, Phasma is no longer in my top 3 Star Wars books.
Rude.
I'm so sorry to tell you that, but the reason is because this book has taken its place. It is, I could not put it down. And I have a very strong feeling that that will be the case for a lot of readers. So I'm excited for this book to finally, first of all, for it to finally be out in the world, and second, to finally be able to talk about it, because I can't talk about it either. You've been with it longer than me, but it's like, I really can't tweet about that thing that just happened. But we're almost there.
Yeah, we're almost there. Yeah. It's challenging. It's hard to talk about it when we're still under embargo.
It's fine. It's almost over. And then another book will come out and that I can't talk about. And it's just a cycle. It never ends.
Yep. Nope, they are. Star Wars is steadily feeding us.
It's good. We're so lucky to be here. This has been fantastic. It's been great to hear about your experience with this book and your experience with Star Wars books overall. And I can't wait for the book to be here and for you to finally be able to say more things about it. I'm excited for you. And let's do this thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It's produced by Devor Mondum and written and hosted by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're in between seasons at the moment, but we will be back with season 2 at some point. Make sure you're subscribed so you know when that's coming. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram.